Welcome back to our weekly discussion. It's been a minute since we sat down to record. We want to get right into the material today, but first, I guess we need to catch up on why there was a delay.
Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with us. We know we missed last week, but things got a little sidelined. Allison ended up with an unexpected third job, and to top it off, got a nasty case of the flu.
Yeah, she's still dealing with a pretty bad cough and some wheezing, but she's finally upright and ready to jump back in. We really appreciate your patience while we were gone.
Yeah, and having that extra week actually gave us a lot of time to just sit with this specific set of lessons. I mean, they require a lot of everyday observation.
We'll do it in two parts. First, we'll look back at lessons 29 through 35, digging into the why behind them, the actual logic the text gives us for why our perspective needs to change got us to find peace.
Right, and that logic is really based on moving the source of meaning out of the external world, and placing it entirely back into the mind.
Yeah, relocating meaning, because I think we spend our lives just assuming we are these independent observers. We wake up and we look out the window or we check our emails and we think we are just documenting what is happening. Like we're just recording whatever facts already exist out there. The world acts and we react. We don't invent the situation, we just observe it. It's clean, it's understandable, and it's how we're taught to function.
But the logic we are looking at today, it unravels that assumption.
Yeah, it really does.
The reason we think an object or a situation has a built-in purpose is because our mind is assigning it a purpose based on our past experiences, our bodily needs, our conditioning.
Right.
The object itself is just neutral.
If the world isn't inherently stressful, why do I feel so much tension all the time? Why is the daily experience so fraught with anxiety if the objects are just neutral?
That brings us to Chapter 2, Section 1. When the mind believes it is in a separated state, meaning it believes it is isolated and cut off from its source, it experiences a foundational lack.
It feels an internal terror.
We think we're just seeing a stressful commute or a rude coworker or a low bank balance.
Right.
But we are actually looking at our own internal state of separation cast outward. It gives the internal terror a specific face. And that feels like a strange sort of control.
Because if I can point to the traffic or the email as the source of my tension, then I don't have to look at the unified mind I've rejected.
You get to say, the problem is out there, not in my own mind.
I noticed this back in 2021. I had surgery for cancer. And after I got home, I entered the waiting game for the pathology results.
Oh yeah, that wait.
It was difficult. I was sitting on my couch, just glued to my phone, hitting refresh on the patient portal. I was terrified.
Yeah.
I assumed the purpose of that lab report was to tell me if I was going to live or die.
I remember how brutal that wait was. That's the moment where everything feels like it's out of your hands and you're just a victim of what's happening out there. And the text addresses this. It says, perception is a mirror, not a fact. To understand the logic behind why we feel that way, we have to look at how the mind projects meaning onto a world it then thinks is outside. We think we're seeing facts, but we're actually looking at our own panic reflected back at us. Looking at Chapter 2, Section 1, the text explains that in a separated state, the mind actually miscreates by projecting its internal state onto the world. We're basically projecting our own past onto objects, so we aren't really seeing their true purpose.
Yeah, looking at the logic of Lesson 29, which tells us we don't actually know what anything is for, I realized I was completely missing the mark on the couch that day. I was using the lab report to maintain an identity as a separate, self-reliant, vulnerable body. The ego uses situations like that to prove its paradigm. It points to the medical portal and says, look, see, you are fragile. You are a victim of biology. The world is dangerous. I was using the report to justify the fear that was already in my mind.
Right, it's a justification.
It was a desperate attempt to say the source of my terror is out there in that portal, not in my own choice to believe I am separated from my source.
Oh.
It's as if I would rather be terrified and write about being a victim than be peaceful and have to admit I don't actually know what anything is for.
Once that clicks, you can't really look at things the same way.
Yeah.
It starts this loosening of our grip on what we think is the truth. We're training ourselves to finally question our own expert assessments of what's happening. In Lesson 31, we practice the idea that I am not the victim of the world I see. To find the reason why our assessments are so shaky, we turn to Chapter 3, Section 4, where the logic is that perception is a choice rather than an objective observation. Softening that certainty is the only way a different light can get in.
Softening that certainty. Even if we are certain that things are going to end terribly, we still cling to that certainty.
Yeah, we think, well, it's a disaster, but at least I called it. I saw it coming.
When we start to realize that our perception is just a choice, and usually a highly flawed choice based on fear, that expert assessment of our own lives collapses, and that collapse feels threatening at first. But it is actually the doorway to redefining what safety even is. If safety isn't found in controlling the external world because the external world is just a reflection, then it forces the mind to look inward. If I were going through that surgery today, I'd apply what I've learned and not focus on all the passing thoughts, like what if it spread? Instead of looking for safety in a lab report, I would use the practice to just notice what's already present, recognizing its neutrality and lack of power to harm me.
Because that practice isn't about ignoring the physical situation or, forcing yourself to believe the report will be positive. That would just be the ego trying to manipulate the reflection again, trying to manage what you see. It's about recognizing where your safety actually resides while you wait at home. You are simply withdrawing your demand that the physical report provides you with your fundamental safety. You let it be a neutral object.
While I was at home, I could have practiced noticing that safety is not found in the report, but in the mind. As the text notes in Chapter 3, Section 4, perception is always a reflection of an internal choice. So the shift is just adjusting attention from the external reflection back to the internal source. It takes me out of the center. It's definitely a perspective we've had to learn to hold over time.
It definitely takes time because the ego is incredibly persistent about wanting to be in the center.
Yeah, it wants to fix everything.
The ego believes that if it just arranges the external world perfectly, gets the right lab results, the right bank balance, the right relationships, then it will finally feel safe.
But because the external world is just a reflection of a separated, terrified mind, the reflection will always eventually show terror.
As we move further into this framework, we hit a concept that is deeply uncomfortable for the separated mind. It's found in Chapter 1, Section 6. It's the assertion that there are no private thoughts because the mind is unified.
That is a tough one. The idea of private thoughts is so central to our sense of who we are. My secrets, my inner monologue, my hidden judgments. That is my private real estate.
Right.
The ego desperately clings to the illusion of private thoughts because it is the ultimate fantasy of separation. If I can have a thought that you don't know about, then I have successfully proven that I am separate from you.
I've drawn a boundary.
Yeah, I have ownership. But the text explains that the separated mind is always in conflict precisely because it's out of accord with its natural unified state.
It doesn't work. And the effort required to maintain those imaginary walls is exhausting. The natural state of creation is a perfectly unified mind where all thoughts are shared in harmony.
But I know what you're probably thinking right now, listening to this. It's easy to talk about a unified mind in abstract terms. But how does this apply to our world?
We're in an era with technology that didn't exist when Helen Schuckman was receiving Jesus' teachings. We didn't have social media. We didn't have phishing, targeted ads, intrusive texts on our phones from complete strangers, password leaks to worry about.
That's an interesting thought. We have to make sure we remember that social media privacy is about protection from intrusion. A Course in Miracles, No Private Thoughts, is about the nature of mind, not exposure, not surveillance, not vulnerability.
We so often conflate physical or digital vulnerability with metaphysical vulnerability.
We do.
The ego says, if there are no private thoughts, then I am completely exposed. Everyone can see all my fearful judgments. I am going to be attacked.
Yeah, but we aren't advocating for giving up your bank passwords or vocalizing every unedited thought that crosses your brain. You can and should have boundaries in the physical world.
You can use two-factor authentication. You can close your blinds at night. Practical safety in the world is completely different from the metaphysical mechanics of vision. When the text says there are no private thoughts, it's not a threat of surveillance. It's an explanation of how our consciousness is inherently connected.
Here's a way to think about it. You know how you can walk into a room and sense the tone before anyone speaks? That's like the Course's version of no private thoughts.
You can feel tension.
Or joy, or grief.
Yes, the mind is a shared space.
Realizing that holding a grievance secretly is still an attack on the whole. That is what makes us finally want to let go of those private grievances.
Because we realize we are only hurting ourselves.
This realization naturally transitions the framework of our study from simply relocating meaning into fundamentally altering our core sense of identity.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so we've covered the idea that the source of meaning is actually in our mind, not in the thing we're perceiving. We're ready for part 2 of today's episode, lessons 36 through 42. This group is a big deal because its goal is to change our whole sense of self from our small personal ego to the mind we share as part of God.
This shift in identity is perhaps the most relieving part of the entire text. In chapter 3, the concept of holiness is introduced, but it is redefined in a way that strips away all our societal baggage. In almost every other paradigm, holiness or goodness or worthiness is something you have to earn.
Right, you have to work for it.
You have to meditate enough, or be kind enough, or suffer enough, or achieve enough to secure it. You are constantly trying to fix yourself, improve yourself, scrub yourself clean.
Because the underlying assumption is that you are fundamentally flawed and you have to work your way out of the deficit. That deficit model is how we are trained to view ourselves from day one.
Exactly. But chapter 3 says that holiness is a pre-existing condition. It is not a quality you earn. It is the condition in which you were created.
Right.
Because your mind is part of God's mind. It is inherently, unalterably sinless and holy. You cannot change your core nature, no matter how many confused, fearful dreams of separation you entertain.
And if we connect this to lessons 37 and 38, my holiness blesses the world, and there is nothing my holiness cannot do, the logic flows perfectly. If holiness is my built-in, unchangeable condition, then my holiness must extend to everything I look at. The source is holy, so what it extends has to be holy. We don't have to try to see holiness in the world. We just have to stop actively projecting guilt over it.
The only reason we don't experience that extending holiness all the time is because we use a psychological defense mechanism called dissociation, which is covered heavily in chapter 2. Dissociation, in this context, is how the ego tries to manage the heavy guilt it feels over believing it is separated from its source. The mind can't handle the guilt of that perceived separation, so it dissociates from it. It splits it off and projects it outward onto the world.
So we end up trying to see a divided, chaotic, guilty world outside of us while pretending we are perfectly insulated, innocent victims on the inside.
We do this every single day.
We look at the news or our neighbors or our coworkers and say, look at all those terrible, guilty people making mistakes. Thank goodness I'm not like them.
It's a defense mechanism to keep the guilt away from ourselves. We need the world to be messed up so that we can feel okay by comparison. But the tragedy is that by projecting the guilt outward, we ensure that we live in a terrifying, hostile world. We build a prison to keep ourselves safe and then forget we have the key.
And we think we need large global events to practice seeing through this, but usually it's just the daily grind that reveals our dissociation the most clearly.
I just had a great real-life moment with this. I got a text that my prescriptions were ready, so I went to the pharmacy. When I got home, I found they'd only put one pill bottle in the bag. I immediately got upset. I'm standing there, creating a mental file of all her past mistakes to justify my frustration. I was totally focused on her being incompetent and how terrible it was that she's making me drive back down there while I'm sick.
Oh, it is so easy to build a whole legal case against someone in your head when you're standing in the kitchen staring at a missing pill bottle.
It really is. The ego loves a situation like that.
You were sick, you were inconvenienced, and there's a very clear, identifiable person to blame. Not only did she mess up today, but remember 3 months ago when she was slow?
Yeah, exactly.
We become completely dissociated, pretending that the source of our inner lack of peace is due to this pharmacist's actions.
I was able to catch myself, but not until after my fit of anger. I remembered that I'm not just my instant anger. I'm a student of the course, just noticing a gap between how I feel and where my real source is. I saw that my holiness extends to everything I see, including the missing prescription and even the pharmacist I was mentally tearing down. I had to stop trying to fix her and drop the belief that my initial judgment was the real truth.
That's such a perfect illustration of how our peace is guaranteed. Holiness and true vision are stable facts. They don't depend on us feeling like a saint. Even though you were sick and still had to drive back, your vision is a gift that's just available. You proved it works even when we feel like a total mess.
What stands out in that experience is that it wasn't about trying to force a warm, fuzzy feeling.
Right. You didn't try to artificially generate a feeling of deep love for the pharmacist while you were still feeling the heat of frustration.
No, not at all. That's what so many of us get wrong about this practice.
Yeah.
We think we have to paste a smile over our tension. We think we have to manipulate our behavior to look spiritual.
Yeah.
I recognized that my annoyance was a symptom of a divided mind out of accord with its own unified reality. The missing pill bottle was neutral, but my mind projected a narrative of victimization, incompetence, and deprivation onto it.
You recognized you were miscreating.
Exactly. And by acknowledging that my initial judgment wasn't the objective truth, I created that softening of certainty we talked about earlier. I withdrew the projection.
And the relief in that is clear. When you realize the fear is entirely self-generated through projection, you can just stop generating it.
Right. You don't have to fight the fear or analyze it endlessly. You just stop valuing the projection that causes it.
And that seamlessly brings us into the final lessons of this review section, lessons 41 and 42. God goes with me wherever I go, and God is my strength. Vision is his gift. Chapter 4 describes the ego as being constantly vigilant for its own survival.
We wake up every day and brace ourselves to go to the grocery store, check our email, to have a conversation.
That constant vigilance isn't just a concept. It is the literal physical tension you feel in your jaw, in your shoulders, in your stomach every single day.
Right.
It is the bodily manifestation of believing you have to be the source of your own strength, your own safety, and your own salvation in a hostile world. You're trying to be the manager of the universe, and it is wearing you out. Dropping that micromanagement is just such a relief. If the unified mind, the core of reality, is my strength, then I don't have to rely on my own personal resources. I can drop the expert act. I don't have to know how to fix the situation. I just have to be willing to see it differently.
It allows us to physically and mentally stop tensing up against life. If God goes with me wherever I go, then there is no external situation that can fundamentally threaten my core reality.
The reflection might be a chaotic situation, like having to drive back to the pharmacy when you have the flu or waiting for a lab report, but the reflection cannot alter the source. And when we really trace the journey we've taken in this discussion, it covers so much ground.
It does.
We started by looking closely at the assumption that we are independent observers of an objective world. We explored how the source of meaning is entirely within our own minds, and that perception is just a reflection of our internal choice. We faced the deeply uncomfortable truth that there are no private thoughts because our minds are fundamentally connected, and we saw how our secret grievances pollute the shared space.
From there, we explored the shift in identity, accepting that our holiness is a pre-existing condition, not something we have to desperately earn through endless self-improvement.
Right.
We saw how easily we use dissociation to project our guilt onto the world, creating scapegoats out of missing pill bottles and everyday inconveniences. And we saw how recognizing that dynamic leads to the logical removal of fear.
It takes us from being separate, struggling, exhausted people trying to carve out a tiny slice of peace in a fundamentally broken world to realizing that peace is a stable, unchangeable gift. It is always available the moment we choose to look inward instead of outward. It's a complete relocation of our trust.
Yeah, it is.
Next time, we'll complete the review of the last 7 lessons before moving on to the next set of 50 lessons. Thanks for joining us for this review, and we'll see you in the next episode as we start the next turn of the wheel.
I woke up to a miracle today.